Hello, I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. Welcome to another episode of SAE Tomorrow Today, a show about emerging technology and trends in mobility with leaders, innovators, and strategists who make it all happen. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to be joined by Ellis Jones, Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. On today's episode, we'll discuss the company's goal to build a better future by using renewable energy and sustainable materials. We hope you enjoy this episode. Ellis, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Grayson. I appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to share the Goodyear sustainability story. Really looking forward to our discussion.
We're honored to have you here. We had Erin Spring on from Goodyear, and she did a wonderful job. But more importantly, Goodyear has a long track record of innovation. The company is constantly innovating, and now you're leaning into sustainability. You're taking a really innovative approach, which I'll call the Goodyear approach. You're doing it the good way, the right way. How is Goodyear approaching sustainability?
That's a great question. First, it's going to be tough to keep up with Erin, but I'll try to do my best here. But that's a great question, and it is a very specific approach for our culture. And you mentioned the innovation in our culture. I call it an integrated approach to sustainability. You know, you often hear of these big ambitions that companies announce around climate, around materials, biodiversity. For Goodyear, it's always important to get everyone engaged in the process and in the strategy. So it's not Ellis's strategy. It won't be successful. It's just, Ellis is the CSO and I own it alone and I'm driving it alone. So we've taken our time and been really deliberate on how we integrate this into our business. I have 3 pillars that I focus on as a CSO. I call it structure, environment, capability. And structure is all around systems and processes and how you build a foundation. So example, how do you determine what you work on? You need to do a materiality assessment and you need to get feedback from internal and external stakeholders, and they will say, here's what's important to us as a stakeholder, and here's what we think will impact you as an organization. So that's one example of building this foundation where Ellis didn't decide what to work on. The stakeholders decided what to work on, including associates. So that's a critical pillar, and there's a lot involved in building structure. The second pillar is environment, and environment is all about our culture. And how do you get the culture really enthused and excited about sustainability? So we really spent a lot of time educating our culture and really, as I talked about that materiality assessment, understanding what's important to them and really engaging the culture through our communication methods. We do town halls. So really getting the culture engaged and taking their input. And then the third pillar is capability. And as you start to build this new muscle, you have to build your associates' capability to put a lens on to look at the business differently. So example, if you're going to develop a tire, a designer has all these different characteristics he or she's thinking about as they develop a tire. Now we have to add sustainability to it. And we have to really teach them to put this lens on. So there's a lot involved in those 3 pillars, but those are just 3 examples of how we use structure, environment, capability to integrate sustainability into what we do as a business.
The culture is very important. We've seen businesses thrive with a great culture. Businesses suffer with a poor culture. Your culture is very strong. Your CEO's made very public statements around the strength of your culture. Is the Goodyear culture the backbone of Goodyear's Better Future strategy? It
is. I mentioned stakeholders and our associates, they are a stakeholder and they're a very important stakeholder. And so engaging our associates, getting their input, and then as I mentioned before, getting them really enthused and excited and inspired about the sustainability strategy is important because the work, as I said, it's integrated into what we do as an organization. So it then stretches beyond my team. So I have to have the finance organization excited about non-financial data. I have to have the materials organization excited about sourcing these new types of materials. Our procurement organization, as we're sourcing materials, they're at the front of, human rights and ensuring that we have no human rights negative impacts in our supply chain. So all the different functions have to be engaged, they have to be inspired, and it needs to be the work that they do versus being something extra. And that's where I think that strong, history of our culture and how our culture really innovates for our company and carries our company forward. That's where you get I think the power of the culture.
The power of the culture is what's going to allow you to succeed. And when you look at supply chains during the depths of COVID, we saw what happened. People couldn't get bounty. They couldn't get groceries. Now the pendulum swung to transparency. Well, wait a second. Some of the materials that are going into tires or going into buildings or going into cars, wait, this is not a healthy work environment. You've taken the approach very smartly, I'll say very, very smartly, to track raw material traceability. You're removing materials of concerns. You're going out of conflict zones. Did the culture bubble that up to you and say, Mr. Jones, this is an issue that we need to look into? Or how did you take the initiative to look into that?
When you think about sustainability, and I think every company discovered this, when you start looking at the scope of sustainability, you look at the SDG goals, the 17 goals, there are a lot of things that we did already. And I think companies are finding that out. It's now, how do you talk about it? So when I think about our supplier code of conduct and what we held our suppliers to, we've always done that. Now, traceability is something new that many of us are trying to solve today, because our supply chain is very complex. If I just look at natural rubber, there are millions of small farmers out there. And now how do you really trace the natural rubber that you purchase through all the different layers of your supply chain down to that small farmer? That's complex, but we can solve those problems. And as an industry, we need to solve that problem together. So we're working within the industry to really understand, how do we work on our biggest material, and really through technology. There's blockchain technology. There are apps that technology organizations are developing that you can put at the very lowest level of your supply chain and start collecting the data. So those things are occurring. So you have regulatory requirements where those things need to happen. So those drive us. I think when you look at the history of Goodyear, as you said, we've always had this model of protect our good culture and protect our good name. So we've leveraged that. And then where the associates come in, because some of this, many associates may not have known we were doing. So as you start talking about it more, they want to hear about it more. And then they start asking you questions of, okay, what else can we do? So it's exciting to see as associates learn, you see their engagement and you see how they start to drive kind of what you do.
It's fun because the associates can bubble up new ideas that you might not have thought about that you might be able to implement and have a really positive impact. When I look at track and trace and I do research on track and trace, I see some are doing steel, some are doing aluminum. You're in the rubber business today.
Yes.
Is the tire industry coming together to get standards that are recognized by the government or recognized by a regulatory body? Says, okay, this is how we're going to do all the transparency. Are you all coming together to ensure transparency around rubber?
Yeah, what we do there, we have the tire industry project where all the major tire companies come together and talk about these issues as an industry. And I think that's one thing we're doing better as an industry is collaborating on those topics that impact all of us. But as an industry, there's no, we all benefit from traceability. We all benefit from technology and the standards around traceability. I don't think anyone wants to go out and say, hey, my product is better than yours because I can trace the supply of it. We want to go down that path together. So we do come together on many different topics, and we determine as an industry, how do we get at this? How do we get at it as an industry? And how do we solve the problem as an industry and pull our thoughts together in an environment that's safe and solve some of these problems together?
It's healthy in the automotive business. The one common denominator is you do not want to compete on safety. And what you're describing, you do not want to compete on transparency because it's good for everybody. It's not just good for one part of the industry. You're tracking rubber. Are there other materials that Goodyear is currently tracking to add transparency to your supply chain? We
wanted to start with rubber because it's the biggest material. It's probably the most complex material. So that's where our focus is. Our focus is on natural rubber, but we do it. You'll notice in our corporate responsibility report, we have goals to stretch beyond natural rubber and get into other materials that we need to trace. So that's part of our ambition. We set those ambitions and we say, okay, where do we need to start? And then we have that longer term ambition to get into other materials within our supply chain. So you'll see that coming from us in the future.
The ambition ties into your corporate culture of innovation. You're saying we're starting with the core, we're going to keep innovating, we're going to keep expanding. Since you put the track and trace in place for rubber, what benefits have you seen? Have you gotten feedback from your customers, from your industry peers? What sort of benefits have you seen?
I think it is just learning more about our supply chain, and understanding, we've done a lot of work with small farmers. And man, it's, when you can get out there and get down to the source of where your materials are coming from, you start learning how they operate. You learn how to make them better as operators, which benefits everyone involved, because if you're starting to trace it down to the small farmer, you start to understand the farmer's operation. You start to understand their challenges. How do they produce more? How do they produce more sustainably as a farmer? You want that farmer to be around for a long time. So then, you think about, other thing, in our supplier code of conduct and in our policy around natural rubber is no deforestation. We don't want to source rubber from areas that is driving deforestation. So you start to learn about that. You start to learn the challenges that those small farmers are dealing with. You start to learn how to help them. And we've done things to help those small farmers get more productive on their farm, where they, if not saying it, but they don't have to worry about these other issues because they can be more productive as farmers. So that's, I think, the biggest thing for us is learning about that lowest level of our supply chain and really understanding how to help them be better at what they do.
While you're learning, you're having, as you described, you're having a positive impact on them.
Yes.
They get to learn from you as well, and that's a win-win. I want to highlight in the Goodyear's 2021 Corporate Responsibility Report, it was extremely well done. It wasn't corporate. It was well done. It had substance, great graphic design. And in there, you highlighted that tires have the potential, I repeat, potential to contribute the most to global warming. To combat this, Goodyear's working on increasing the product lifetime. So you're helping the farmers. You're saying, okay, there is a potential situation here. We're going to work to solve that. How is Goodyear working to increase the lifetime of the tires?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great point. I think as we think about tires, and I always joke, no one, you probably don't wake up in the morning, Saturday morning, and say, "Hey, I'm ready to go out and buy tires today." But they, look, tires are some people do. Some people are excited. I'm excited about tires. So, but tires have a great impact. When you think about what has impact on that road, it's those 4 tires, and it's a very small footprint on the road. But if you think about the longevity of a tire, and how long does that tire last? There's been a lot of technology over the years improving the life of the tire. And how do we get more life out of that tire? We're doing a lot of work around rolling resistance. For those who don't understand rolling resistance, there's compound, there's chemistry that you can put into a tire to improve the rolling resistance. There's also behaviors as drivers that help us improve rolling resistance. So we want to improve the rolling resistance of that tire to improve the fuel efficiency of your car. And we have to educate, our consumers about how they can control it and improve it, and how we can improve it through the technology in a tire. So a lot of work around tread life, getting more life and getting more miles out of that tire. A lot of work around rolling resistance and improving the fuel efficiency of that tire, which really comes into play as more EVs start to hit the road and autonomous vehicles start to hit the road. And the technology in that tire is so critical to the new technology and mobility that's starting to emerge.
Would one example of those tires for EVs be the electric drive 20 GT tires?
Yes. So when you think about, people always ask us, what's going to be different with tires as you get EVs and AVs? Well, you think about that EV, it's a heavier car. The battery, it's a heavier car. So if you just, not that, you have the same tires on EVs as you have on combustible engines, but we're starting to learn how to develop tires that last longer under that weight of that vehicle. Tires that have better rolling resistance, because the weight can impact the rolling resistance, we want to design a tire that can perform under the weight of that vehicle. So tread life, to give you a longer lasting tire, improving rolling resistance to help with now not fuel efficiency, but now battery life. It improves battery life in terms of how much mileage you get out of that one charge. So those are very important as EVs and then AVs start to hit the road.
As they hit the road and looking to the future, will tires be designed for specific makes and models of vehicles to ensure the max amount of safety, performance? Perhaps this EV class weighs more than this EV class, so you might design a different tire, or this AV, for example, is designed to go 1,000,000 miles. So we designed a tire that's going to be swapped, I'm just going to use a number, every 100,000 miles based on performance. Are you looking at all those nuances?
You have to, and it'll be difficult to design a tire for every make and model of vehicle, but you do start to look at the types of vehicles, what's changing in the vehicles, and how do you design for that change that's occurring in that vehicle. So look, if you look at 5 SUVs, you use the same tire, but we do start to look at the characteristics of those vehicles being designed, and then how do we improve our technology to help that vehicle be as efficient as that driver needs it to be. You think about it, when you get an EV, it's so, one of the things, going back to the EV tire, now the noise of the engine has gone away. And what do you hear now as a driver saying, what's that noise? We don't want it to be the tire. So now how do we design a tire that's quieter, and you don't hear that noise? So those are some of the things we have to think about as, again, EVs and AVs start to hit the road. AVs, that's another one that's for us, we see opportunity there as we think about the connected tire and the data that we're going to get to fleets, and data we need to get to you if you're driving an autonomous vehicle. How can we get more data to help you with, you're not driving AV, but you may be sitting in the back of an AV. But how do we get more data to the owner, to the fleet operation, to the owner, to help them manage that tire? And that data is going to be very critical to understand. There's no longer a driver feeling the impact of the road. The tire now must tell you what's going on with road conditions. It must tell you how's your inflation rate on your tires. Are you entering into a snowy area, an icy area? How's that going to impact the operation of the vehicle? Does it need to slow down? So there's so much technology that you can get from a tire, and that's some of what you'll see from tires in the future. It's that connected tire, it's that smart tire, and using that data to help fleets and help individuals as they operate autonomous vehicles.
I'm very thankful you brought that up. I was recently at CES and was talking to a gentleman who runs one of the largest fleets in America for trucks, and he's looking into autonomous trucks. And we're there with an AV developer, and we're talking about what happens if the tire blowout. How is the system going to know that the tire blew out? It's a common occurrence that happens on Class 8 trucks around the globe, for a matter of fact. What you're describing, we could put a sensor in that Class 8 tire where it can note to dispatch or note to the company, hey, there was a tire blowout, or oh, wait a second, we're going into this condition and then we're losing traction, might want to pull the truck over for safety reasons, to send out a dispatcher to see what's going on?
That is exactly what we want to do. That, as you said, the worst thing that can happen for an autonomous fleet is a vehicle goes down. Any fleet, the worst thing that can happen is your vehicle goes down for any reason. You don't want to go down for a tire issue. So what we hope to do is be able to get enough data where there's a warning that says you're about to have, this tire's about to fail. So you want to be able to perform that maintenance on that tire or replace that tire before it fails. So if we can get, the data, the type of road conditions that this tire has been under, and maybe there's an early warning that says, look, there's been a lot of adverse road conditions that your tires have been under. Hey, maybe it's time to, if it's a large fleet, maybe it's time to retread the tire. Maybe it's time to replace the tire. So it's getting enough data. Definitely, as the tire fails, you can send that warning quickly. But before the tire fails, man, that would be the ultimate goal of a connected tire.
You can make the point that Goodyear's connected tires are mission critical to the safe operations of the vehicle or that truck.
That's exactly right. That's what you want. You want that fleet to say, man, my tires, it's critical. And fleets do this today. Tires are it's a critical component for fleets today. As I say, you don't want your fleets to go down, whether it's autonomous or whether someone's driving that fleet. So it's important today. But again, it becomes even more important when there's not a driver in that vehicle. Then that driver becomes, you become an expert in understanding road conditions, understanding, the feedback that they're getting from their tires. Now that connected tire has to be that driver and give that feedback to that fleet. So it becomes more important.
Well, I'll give you a term, becomes the new driver, essentially, because without tires, you're not going from point A to point B.
That's exactly right. It's where mobility is going, and tires are going to play an important role in that.
Yeah, and they have historically, and they play for the last 100 years, and they'll play it for the next 100 years. Getting back to sustainability, your customers, the large fleet owners, they're under pressure. They're on for sustainability to reduce carbon emissions on their routes. As we mentioned, the potential the tires could have on global warming. Are you working with your partners, your fleet owners, your AVs, your EVs to develop tires that are made from sustainable materials, and so you can go say Goodyear's made you a sustainable tire?
Yes, that is so important for us. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's a big, bold ambition for us. If you notice, our goal, our ambition by 2030 is to develop a sustainable material tire and a maintenance-free tire, and that's a big goal for us. We recently announced, a 90% demo tire. So we released that last week at the CES show, and our chairman has said, look, we're going to sell a sustainable material tire by the end of this year with up to 70% sustainable materials. So it is a big goal for us. It's an important one for us. You talk about getting associates excited. Our teams are excited about that ambition. They're excited about all of our ambitions, but that one really resonates through the organization and the team working on that. I mean, look, it's a team of associates, and they are, man, you talk about an engaged team, a highly effective team. They are working towards that goal, and it's exciting to see. So that is something that a lot of fleets are interested in. I think consumers are interested in it. Our OEMs are interested in it. So a lot of energy around that ambition.
What will a sustainable material tire be made of?
Oh, there's, it's fun to see the materials come about. So, people think natural rubber, Ellis, that's a sustainable material, but what you have to, we talked about it earlier, natural rubber, you have to source it in a sustainable way. So no human rights violations, no deforestation. You want to make sure you do that. Carbon black. So different types of carbon black. As you know, many of our materials are kind of come from, fuel. So we want to make sure we get different forms of carbon black. Silica, rice husk ash silica. Say that real fast. So silica from rice husk. Which is a waste. So, there's two things we're doing. You're eliminating the waste because it's a byproduct of rice. And now we're developing silica from that rice husk to put into our materials. There's recycled plastics that we're using for fabrics and nylons. There's so many different materials. But I tell you, the fun thing about it is the different technologies that are emerging through different suppliers. We get calls all the time from different suppliers who say, I think I have this type of material that you can use. So the collaboration that's occurring, it's fun to watch, because when I think about sustainability, I think about opportunities. And sustainable materials, it's starting to drive opportunities within our supply chain of new suppliers and current suppliers.
And I'm going to go on a limb here with a smile on my face. I'm sure your lab team's having a lot of fun.
They are. They really are. And when we think about sustainable materials, and we get people often say, well, how fast can I get the tire? Can I get the tire tomorrow? And that's why it was fun to see our CEO announce we're going to sell the tire. But the thing that we have to do, and this is where, we really make sure people understand, it's the chemistry is so important. In tires, we know how important it is to safety. So the chemistry in that tire is so critical. It must perform under all types of conditions. So as we look at these new materials, we have to get the chemistry right. And the best case scenario is that it performs better. I mentioned soybean oil performs better. We don't want it to perform worse. We want it to perform the same or better in all types of conditions. But then the other is the supply chain and developing a new supply chain for these materials. So there's work to do, and on the chemistry side and on the supply chain side, to develop the supply chain for these new materials. So it takes time, but it's coming together, and it's starting to really build some momentum.
It's building momentum. You're making it happen. So the sustainable tires by 2030, and then by 2040, Goodyear's committed to only using renewable energy. You're setting very, very ambitious goals.
Yes, very important for us. So we think about our climate strategy. We have a science-based climate strategy or ambition that we announced last year for 2050 net zero. 2030, we have an interim goal in 2030 of about a 46% reduction in our emissions. So an important element of that is renewable energy. So by 2040, we will be 100% renewable energy in our footprint. Our European operation has already gotten there in their footprint, so it was a big win for our operation. So, and that's involving, and in that science-based target, and if you're, for the listeners who understand science-based target, if you do a science-based target, you can't just go out and buy offsets. You can't just, okay, I'm just going to buy offsets and I'm done. Offsets, and if you read our ambition, we're saving that for the last 10% of our ambition or our goal. Hopefully we won't need to do it. So we're looking at on-site generation. We're looking at purchase power agreements through suppliers. So we're looking at opportunities to improve the infrastructure and then tap into that infrastructure, whether it's on-site or off-site, and we're sourcing that renewable energy. But that's a big goal for us. And I'll tell you, the team is really excited about that. And we went from about 3% 2 years ago of renewable energy in our footprint. We're at 35% now. So really accelerated. And I think we're going to continue to see that acceleration over the next several years.
32% acceleration in 2 years?
Yes. That was, again, and this is the power of integration. When it's owned by Ellis, Ellis is trying to get it, trying to convince people to do that. But when the organization says this is the right thing to do, then your functions start to own it. So when we look at our climate strategy, it's sponsored by our chairman, our CEO, and then I lead the team, but engineering is a member of the team, and they are actually driving the renewable energy strategy. Procurement is on the team. So they'll drive a lot of the scope 3 emissions through our suppliers. Logistics, they'll drive it through our logistics carriers. Accounting's on the team because we have to account for it differently. And as we enter these agreements, how do we enter these agreements and how do we invest in infrastructure? So we have all these different functions now driving the strategy. And that's how you get the acceleration from 3% to 35%. You have the integration in your company.
You had the experience. You've worked in the finance department. You worked in manufacturing, and you have this really good understanding of the wonderful culture that is Goodyear, and it's a team effort. Has your broad experience inside of Goodyear influenced the way that you're approaching sustainability?
Yes, it has. I talked about that three-pronged approach, and that was very important. I've been in Goodyear for 33 years, and as you said, a lot of different experience, finance, operations, different business units. And so I understand how Goodyear works. And I understand it works better when it's a collective group driving it and you get a buy-in from the team. So in Goodyear, you have to influence. Look, our CEO has to influence. My boss, the CTO, he has to influence. So, yes, there are top-down goals that you can drive through your organization, but as you deploy those goals down through the organization and align the organization, you have to help people understand what their input needs to be, how they influence and drive this goal, and as I said, how do they now put the lens on and you build that capability? So understanding the organization, understanding how you influence our organization has been very critical for me and my team in being successful in developing a strategy and then executing a sustainable strategy.
It's very important that you execute a sustainable strategy because organizations now are being judged on sustainability. It's a metric out there in public filings. It's a metric that investors are looking for ESG. How do you see the sustainability evolving as a metric of corporate success in the future?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very important. And the way we think about it is because, as I said before, if it's something extra, it's hard to get the organization to go because there's so much to do. And so that integration, and so the way we talk about it is, because a long time we talked about a sustainability strategy versus a business strategy. And now we're talking about a sustainable business strategy. And, so it becomes the work. I never get my CFO as we were talking about our climate strategy and we were talking about measuring, the indicators for our climate strategy. And he said, Ellis, and we were doing some work and influencing the organization. And he said, Ellis, this is the work. This is the work we do now. This isn't extra. So the team has to understand, and we have to let the team know that this now becomes the work. So now these measures, they used to be sustainability measures. Now they're just measures within a function, and you roll it up with your business metrics, and they become your business metrics. So you have to choose which are the right ones. But these non-financial metrics, they just become part of your business metric. And then as a company, you define what a sustainable business model is for your business. And you start measuring towards that goal of a sustainable business model.
I like the term sustainable business strategy. I haven't heard that a lot. Well done on that.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. As we look into the future, what is the future sustainability at Goodyear? Do you continue to evolve, move things towards lower carbon, integrate it deeper into the business operations? Because right now you're firing on all cylinders on the culture. So I'm really curious of how it's going to work.
It is. It's, we actually, again, we're very intentional how we go about these things. So we actually have a maturity model that we measure. We measure our progress on this continuum of maturity. And the way I explain it is, the way the model's set up is there's that very low maturity level of, hey, there's this hero in your organization really driving it. And that would be me as the hero. And as this integration occurs, you start to get a functional integration where now your functions are leading it. And then the step I'm describing is a business integration where your business model starts to change. A perfect example is a sustainable material tire. This is the way it works. You may have the technology organization developing a demo tire. That's great functional integration. But now the business has to take it and say, how do I sell it? So we are in that we're moving towards that business integration phase where it does become a part of our business and now becomes a sustainable business model. So that's what's next for Goodyear. The ultimate level is your brand is known as a sustainable brand. That's a big decision for any company. I describe a Patagonia as a brand. When you think Patagonia, you think sustainability. It's a big decision for a company. Not all companies want to be there. Not all companies need to be there. We want to get to that business integration, where our products and our services, and we talked about some of that with connected tire, sustainable material tire, and then you make the decision if you want to go to that ultimate level. But I want to see that business integration because that's where you really start taking advantage of opportunities and you start to give back as a business.
At the end of the day, it comes down to brand. You mentioned Patagonia. From the early days before sustainability was cool, Patagonia was promoting it and doing really great things for the environment. You could make an argument that they're one of the greatest sustainable brands of all time for all the work that they've given back. The Goodyear brand stands for quality, success, and the world's best tires. And now, Ellis, with your work, it's going to stand for the best sustainable tire company, because all roads lead to Akron, and those roads are going to be sustainable.
That's right.
In the future.
That's right.
And Ellis, as we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
Look, we've talked about a lot, but I think the thing that sticks out, and you mentioned it in terms of the role that tires have played in mobility. And again, as I said, a lot of people, man, that tire, it may not wake up excited about the tire, but the role that the tire will play in the future of mobility will be even greater. I may take your tagline that the tire becomes the new driver. I don't know. That's, but it is. I think people need to understand that tire will play a bigger role in mobility, in the future of mobility, and then for Goodyear, we want to be a part of that. And, we want to be a part of that. We want to really impact the future of mobility and how people think about their driving experience and their mobility experience. We want to be a part of that. And we're making significant strides towards that.
Goodyear's building on their 100-plus year history of innovation, because Goodyear is ushering in the future of sustainable mobility. Today is tomorrow, tomorrow is today, and the future is and has always been Goodyear. Ellis, thank you so much for coming on SAE Tomorrow Today.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate the conversation and looking forward to connecting in the future.
Thank you for listening to SAE Tomorrow Today. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, please kindly rate, review, and let us know what topics you'd like for us to explore next. Be sure to join us next week as we speak with Gavin P. Brown, Executive Director of the Michigan Aerospace Manufacturers Association. He'll discuss the Michigan Launch Initiative, which aims to make Michigan the epicenter of a new space ecosystem.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.